Welcome to the Longview Rotary Club on May 23rd, 1995. We'll get started today with our song that's going to be led by Scott Novey. We'll sing God Bless America, written by Irving Berlin in the 1920s. Scott will also lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then John C. Murphy will give our prayer. We're accompanied today on the piano by Dr. Ross Judson.
For those people that have been leading us for years in this club and in this community. Remember those who are now sitting with me. Father, you always provide everything of our need. We know that you are the Alpha and the Omega and everything in between. Father, we thank thee for those who parted this food this day, for those who prepared it. I cite blessings upon it. May we ever be mindful of the needs of others. For our Lord Jesus Christ we ask. Amen.
Let me welcome you to the 75th birthday party of Longview Rotary. Dr. Wayman Norman and his family came to Longview in 1951 and joined the staff of Dr. Hurst Ear, Eye, Nose, and Throat Clinic and Hospital. He immediately was brought into Rotary and served as our president in 1955-56. Wayman took over the ear, nose, and throat portion of Dr. Hurst's clinic in 1954 and later opened his own clinic on Judson Road. Wayman retired from medicine in 1988. He is very active at First Baptist Church, serving as a deacon, a teacher, and in the music ministry. Further, he was a founding member of Oakland Heights Baptist Church, serving there in almost every capacity. Since retirement, Wayman has served as president of the East Texas Civil War Roundtable and is active in the Kilgore Oil Museum and the Gregg County Historical Society. It is my great pleasure to present to you our Master of Ceremonies for today, Dr. Wayman B. Norman.
Thank you, Thomas. Surely an appropriate text for today's meeting is found in Hebrews 12:1. We are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses. And so we're talking today, and we're thinking about some of those great people in days gone by. Of O.H. Methvin, when in 1870 he gave 100 acres to the Southern Pacific Railway. Why, our courthouse square was his cornfield, and the rest of downtown Longview was some more of that 100 acres. We're thinking today of some of those early city fathers and bankers and businessmen and preachers and doctors and educators and of those outlying farmers who knew so well how to grow good cotton and sweet potatoes and watermelons. And we're thinking of their wonderful wives who literally worked from before dawn until after dark, and somehow along the way managed to teach their children music and classical literature. And we're thinking today of those wonderful people who 75 years ago started Rotary in Longview. You know, there's just something about Rotary. You can go back in the history of every meaningful city in the United States, way back, and you'll find Rotary. Now, with that as an intro, I need to introduce a few special people, and I dare not try to say many names or I'll leave out somebody extraordinarily important. I'll be very careful. So let's hold the applause until all of these dear people are standing, and I'll stand them up maybe by categories. First of all, let me ask district governors and children of district governors to please stand all over. Any children? There you go. Wonderful. Thank you. Remain standing. Let me ask all children, our grandchildren of charter members of the Longview Club to stand. Yes. Yes. Let me ask all past presidents of Rotarians and their wives and children to please stand. Mrs. Ralph Parker here came the farthest, I believe. Yes, children, yes, now we're coming. Beautiful. Now let me ask all visiting Rotarians from out of town and their wives. Thank you so much. I think the only person who may not qualify for any... Now, Nina, you're a wife of a past president. You're supposed to be standing. Yeah. Mrs. Ellick Ryan here was in a picture in your book. You look for her. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. I do hope and pray I didn't leave out somebody extremely important. Now our present district governor, John Childs, has a special award.
Thank you, Dr. Norman. Recently I had some surgery and the club sent me a good get well soon card, and I appreciate that. I was going through some of the cards a couple of days ago. I got one from one of our clubs in our district that said something like this: "Dear 1 o'clock John, we voted 18-5 to send you this get well soon card. P.S. We would have sent flowers, but it was voted down 5-15. And Dr. Norman, I heard someone as they introduced you say under your breath, eye, ear, nose, throat, and someone said wallet a while ago. I'm honored to be here on behalf of Rotary International to present this certificate from the president of Rotary International to Kim. Where are you, Kim? Okay. Present this certificate honoring the Longview Club of the Rotary Club of Longview for 75 years of membership in Rotary International. Congratulations to you. Okay.
It's only because I'm an extreme gentleman that I don't retort to that, John. Now we have another award by John Troy. John?
I know by now all of you have seen the book, The Club in the Town, and you know what a wonderful job Gene McWhorter has done in helping us celebrate our 75th anniversary. But as always, things have gone on behind the scenes that you may not know about. Gene's worked on this book out of his home for the past 2 years. He's covered his house with musty clippings, with photographs, with bulletins, and with all sorts of things. He's worked so hard at the book that sometimes the job that he does for a living has of necessity suffered. Through it all, Gene's wife Nancy, who is sitting right here at the middle front table, if you would just stand for just a second. Thank you. Has been a stalwart supporter and has been standing behind him and beside him throughout. In appreciation for the patience that you've shown, Nancy, and the help that you've given, and the help that you've let Gene give, our club has wanted to honor you with our annual Paul Harris Fellowship. Like the book itself, that won't put any food on your table. It will allow many good deeds to be done, and we now give Gene back to you after you've shared it with us, and he can catch up on all those honeydews he missed. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Now President Kit Callahan has a couple of awards.
I'd like to ask at this time that Gene McWhorter and Vic Burchell and John Troy come up just briefly. Gentlemen, you did a magnificent job on the history book project. Although many others here in the room contributed greatly to the project, it was your leadership from start to finish that ensured that the project would be well done and be a big success. The Rotary Club would like to present you with a small token of our appreciation of your work and your dedication. These Western ties were specially designed and handmade for each of you by Gene and Barbara Austin. They're made of sterling silver and natural gemstones, and each one has a small Rotary emblem. We hope that you enjoy these. That's yours, Gene. And John. Thank you. Thank you. We hope that you enjoy these little ties, and once again you have our thanks for a job well done.
Now then, folks, we're ready for a very unique program. If you will turn to your program here, you can follow. You do have Ah, yes. Kim does have another. I thought he had another presentation here. Yes, sir.
At this time, I'd like to ask Dale Messner to stand, and also John Childs. Dale, it's a real honor today to recognize you, and very appropriate. We'd like to present you with your 52-year perfect attendance pin. That 52-year pin represents 52 years of 100% attendance. We'd like to thank you for your dedication and your service to Rotary.
Shoot, I'm not even 52 years old yet. Now, if you'll turn to your program, this unique program has 5 parts corresponding exactly to the little time sequences in your book. Isn't that something? Now, after this brief introduction, I'll fade away, and this program will flow along smoothly. Each particular part will be introduced by just a few bars of a nostalgic bit of music by Dr. Ross Judson. Immediately after these nostalgic bars of music, J.R. Curtis Jr. will pop up with a little sound bite of news from the era. And then you will notice fine speakers are going to speak for 4 minutes or less. After that, I put ice down their collar. Take it away, Ross.
Come on in here, come on in here, Alexander's ragtime band. Come on in here, come on in here, it's the best band in the land.
It's the early 1920s. Longview has 9½ miles of paved streets, concrete sidewalks, electric streetlights, city garbage collection, a paid fire department with the first 2 pumping trucks in the state, and home mail delivery. Oliver Daniel and Dr. V.R. Hurst have raised money to build a 5-story, 64-room hotel, later to be owned by Conrad Hilton. Ironically, as we celebrate our 75th anniversary, that hotel building was torn down just last month. As the Depression begins, the T&P Railroad moves its division offices to Mineola, taking 700 families from our city, reducing Longview's population to approximately 5,000.
According to the books by the Longview Centennial Committee and G. McWhirter's Traditions of the Land, from its incorporation in 1872 until the 20s, when growth accelerated, Longview was a well-situated center of farming and banking. Edward Bussey was the first president of Longview Rotary Club after it was formed by Ike Hockwald of Marshall and R. Marvin Kelly of Longview. Our club was organized as a provisional club of Marshall after Mr. Hockwald organized the Marshall Club in 1919. After attending Rotary Club 39 in Dallas and a Rotary meeting in San Francisco and being sold on the ideals of Rotary, and the 2 men decided to do something about organizing a Rotary Club in East Texas. The Longview Rotary Charter Night Dinner was held May 1st, 1920 in the Magnolia Hotel. The weekly meeting day was set as Tuesday and has remained so throughout the entire history of the club. The Magnolia Hotel was located on the southeast corner of Cotton Street and Court Street, the site of the old Longview City Hall and the current downtown fire station. Edwin Rimbert was the 2nd president for the year in 1921-22. He was the father-in-law of Roy Wilson, a longtime member of this club. From the beginning, the Longview Rotary Club was zealous in its efforts to extend the Rotary movement in East Texas. Longview Rotary sponsored organization of Jacksonville Rotary Club in 1921, the Jefferson Rotary Club in 1924, the Gilmer Club in 25, Atlanta in 26, and the Kilgore Club in 1934. The father of our Rotary Club, R. Marvin Kelly, the 3rd president in 1922-23. G.A. Kelly Plow Company was the town's primary industry until after World War II. He was principal founder of the East Texas Chamber of Commerce in Longview in 1926, serving as its first president. Excerpts from the rotograph of September 30, 1922 inform us of how the club had raised $1,500 for a student's loan fund with a guarantee of with a goal of $5,000 to assist worthy boys to finish schoolwork. An athletic committee was appointed to cooperate with high school athletic director in promoting clean athletics among the boys. Mr. Kelly was grandfather of our fellow member, George Kelly. Baldwin Daniel Marshall Jr. was the 4th president in 23-24. He was a pioneer in the laundry business and was owner of and operator of Longview Steam Laundry, located on what is now the southwest corner of Good Shepherd Medical Center site. Dr. Robert Hall was the 5th president in 24-25, and he was the pastor of the First Presbyterian Church until 1929. Arthur L. Connor was the 6th president in 25-26. He operated the Connor Dry Goods Company located on the northwest corner of Bank Street in Fredonia, which is now the present site of Longview National Bank. Langley Albertus Sessoms was the 7th president in 26-27 and was the great-great-uncle of Bobby Smith and his son Hank, both members of this club. LeGrand D. Kelly was the 8th president and younger brother of Marvin Kelly. He was the founder of this Pinecrest Country Club, a city alderman and later commissioned for 20 years. And he was instrumental in formulating the city charter, which was established the commission manager form of government in Longview. Judge Will C. Hurst was the 9th president in 28 and 29. He was the first chairman of the Longview Community Chest, which is now known as the Greater Longview United Way. The 10th president was a very special man in my life. I was named Robert Wallace Norton after my great uncle H. Wallace Norton, who was president in 1929-1930. Uncle Wallace was vice president and general manager of Graham Manufacturing Company and brother of a later president, Mr. Lee Norton. Uncle Wallace later served as president of the Parish Rotary Club. After the Gregg Hotel was built on the northwest corner of Green and Methven Street in 1930, the club moved its meetings there and remaining until the move to Pinecrest Country Club in 1978.
There'll be bluebirds over the white cliffs of just over. Tomorrow, just you wait and see.
In late 1930, the Longview Chamber of Commerce offers $10,000 to the first person who produces an oil well within 12 miles of the city. January 26, 1931, the Lathrop skipper came in producing 18,000 barrels a day. Even with Prohibition, honky-tonks sprang up everywhere. The last survivor still flourishes, Maddie's Ballroom, known as the Rio. Martial law, controlling the mushrooming population and oil production, plus surviving the World War II years make living in Longview something to experience between 1930 and 1945.
It's a pleasure for me to be able to talk about these days because I feel like truly I grew up with Longview. I'm a boomer, and that's an exciting time in Longview's history. In fact, in 15 short years, Longview changed from an agricultural community to a new era which would change the community forever, the East Texas oil boom. If that were not enough, then the community faced a terrible world war, and we think that the world is changing too fast for us today. During that period of time, we had such outstanding presidents who were all movers and shakers in the community. They were active in their churches and all the civic organizations, local government. They were originators, creators, builders of coalitions, public and private sector. In those days, they got together and they decided, well, we need a city park. So Stamford Park became a city park instead of the Gregg County Park. They needed a Boy Scout troop, so they organized a Boy Scout troop and they built a cabin at the Stamford Park. So they sat down and got together, and the many wonderful things that are our community today were all formed with people who were members of this Rotary Club. The presidents, for example, Quest Whitney, he was with Longview Ice and Light, which now has become SWEPCO. And we have many members of our Rotary Club that SWEPCO has given leadership to. Our famous city manager, Bill Taylor, who was very outstanding. He was president of the International City Managers and did a lot of the early work of city planning, our first city plan that has made our community as strong as it is today. Brenner Smith, farmed Gans and Smith with his brother. His daughter Claire Foster's with us today, and then he also was in the oil business. Curtis Meadows, at that time, was the manager of the Gregg Hotel, the new hotel, which was just formed, and where Rotary met for many years. Tom Richardson was in the grocery business and then got in wholesale grocery and tobacco. Gerald Osborne, who was head of the Western Union here and then was with Western Union all over the state after he moved away. Grover Finch, who was the organizer of many financial institutions, whose nieces Eva Jean Blunt and Elaine Clanton are here today. Also organizer of Pinecrest Country Club, where we enjoy ourselves today. Henry L. Foster, who was an educator and one of the most respected members of the community. Claire Foster is here, of course, today as his daughter-in-law. J. Marcus Wood, who was an oil distributor. Dr. Robert Womack, I think, is interesting. He was a urologist, which is pretty unusual to have a specialist in our community and the medical profession in those days. But he came to Longview to make his fortune in the oil business. He later went to Shreveport, was well recognized in the medical community over there for many years. Of course, Oliver Lee Norton, who also was a grocer and well respected in the community. Erskine Bramlett, an attorney, and was a judge. Maurice Bivens, who was in the cotton business, and then we got in the oil business. All these were neighbors. Some of these were neighbors of mine over on Covington Drive, former Northcutt farm, where I first got to be acquainted with the Northcutts, and we've had such a wonderful relationship since. Casey Papool, who was in oil manufacturing, one of our early manufacturing businesses. And then Lawrence Birdsong, who was in Mercantile and in the building business. And I think Lawrence Birdsong Jr. is here today with us. Truly, these were men of exceptional quality and character and have made our community so strong. Some of the projects that Rotary was involved in those days were the formation of the Kilgore and Gladewater clubs. As I said, the Stamford Park and the Boy Scout Troop 202. The Royal Urban Program, where they tried to keep the farmers and the city people all communicating and bringing them into the development of the region. An interesting project was the welcome banquet for Carl Estes, the publisher of the Longview News, and Rotary was the one who organized that banquet, who of course was the forerunner of economic development in the community. The YMCA was begun to be talked about in those days, and the formation of it was beginning. The Crippled Children's Program, and then they had a teachers banquet every year for the teachers in the Longview Independent School District until it became so large that they could not feasibly do that. But we still have the recognition program for our Longview Independent School District teachers. And then another project which was dearly beloved by my father, the Roundup Club, was begun in those days, and then actually became a building later on for the youth, and many of us in this room enjoyed that. We had our first economic development initiative and incentive back in 1931 when the Chamber got together $10,000 to drill a well within 12 miles of the city of Longview. In fact, that did happen, and Barney Skipper was the one who drilled the well, which was south of Spring Hill, and it was the first well in Gray County. So we had incentives back then for economic development. 15 years later, after going through a terrible World War, where at one of the district conferences, they called it the rationed conference. The community would usher in another era, which is the post-war industrial years. And I would like to quote them, since we're moving into recycling now, and that nothing changes ever. What comes around again. In the Rotary, editor Bob Spate wrote, "Now that the European phase of the war is over, let's renew the following pledge. I will buy only what I need. I will pay no more than ceiling prices, and I will pay my ration points in full. I will save, I will buy, and hold all war bonds and stamps I can, and then some. I will save my things, make them last longer. I will save materials by salvaging paper, metal, fats, and so on. I will save manpower for Uncle Sam by working or helping with home chores. I will save transportation by walking wherever possible. Victory is in sight. One more Heidi heave, and all working together, the nations of the world can bring peace. We must do our part."
It's 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock rock. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight.
Longview's population swells 3 times in the post-war years to over 40,000 by 1960. R.G. Letourneau begins the Industrial Revolution in this community with the establishment of his manufacturing plant, which is followed by Texas Eastman, Stroh's Brewery, and hundreds of other companies. Higher education takes on new life as Harmon Army General Hospital becomes Letourneau Technical Institute to train returning war veterans. Letourneau University today is joined by campuses of Kilgore College, UT Tyler, and East Texas Baptist University.
The post-war era, 1945 to 1962. World War II was coming to an end when past District Governor George Kelly installed President Ralph Parker and the other new Rotary officers on July the 3rd, 1945. Germany had already surrendered, and in 6 weeks so did Japan. Peace at last. So much happened to our town and our Rotary Club during this exciting era. Our Rotary membership was growing, and so was Longview's population. Industries were coming to Longview, and with them came new community leaders and Rotarians. Peace at last, or so we thought. The Korean War began in 1950, some thinking it was a prelude to World War III. Communism had to be contained. In our Rotary View, an article headed Rotary Intolerance on February the 2nd, 1954, by its editor, Tom Putnam, noted that the club had 52 Methodists, 24 Baptists, 9 Christians, 8 Presbyterians, 4 Episcopalians, 3 Jews, 2 members of the Church of Christ, 1 Lutheran, 1 Catholic, and 1 member of the Salvation Army. 105 in all. The presidents of Longview Rotary serving during the 1945 and 1962 era were in order: Ralph R. Parker, Delbert M. Messner, J. Stephen Topp, Dr. Vesey R. Hurst, John W. Harrison, George A. Kelly II, O. Thomas Welch, Austin C. Hatchell, Ellie Hopkins, Henry A. Pitt, Dr. Wayman B. Norman, at age 32, our youngest president ever. Cecil W. Richardson, Dr. Allen C. Tyler, Charles R. Perkins, Joseph W. Dunsworth, Dale H. McDaniel, Victor E. Furchel, and Starling M. Mars. Now, one last item about the era that I have, and that phase is attendance. The one thing that we did in 1961-62 that really bears mentioning is our attendance. The job of attendance was turned over to Rotarian Duncan Kinchlow. Our attendance worries were over. Pre-Kinchlow time, our club attendance was in the high 80%. After Kinchlow, our attendance was 95, 98, 99, and some 100% meetings. In April of 1962, the Longview Rotary Club was #1 in Rotary International of clubs from 100 to 199 in membership. Our attendance for that month was 99.46. Longview Rotary was moving on.
Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away, and now it looks as though they're here to stay. Oh, I believe in yesterday.
New schools, floods, and the bombing of the Longview School bus barn on a July 4th mark a turbulent period in Longview's history, capped by the loss of sons in the Vietnam War. Longview's business leaders push for controlled growth as new business and industry comes to town, a large part tied to oil. Gregson becomes part of the city, and retail shopping marks the start of a new era with talk of building a shopping mall. The Pine Tree and Longview school districts struggle with expansion, and the Pine Tree boys win the city's first state basketball championship.
In retrospect, I guess it was appropriate when Thomas Welch asked me to introduce Chapter 4, one of 3 Rotary clubs, 1963 to 1978. I joined Rotary during Duncan Kinchelow's term as president in 1963-64, and the chapter ends in 77-78 was my year as president. There are several reasons why 1963 can be considered a turning point in the history of the Rotary Club of Longview, for which it is appropriate to begin with a new chapter. Most obviously, this is the end of the previous history of the club published in 1963. Further, the establishment of the Gregton Club in '62 marked the end of the long era in which ours was the only Rotary Club in Longview. Sharing the act made a big difference in the life of the club and its relationship with the community. A few years later, the third Longview Rotary Club was born. Looking at landmarks beyond the local scene, this time saw the beginning of decentralization of cities throughout the country by the automobile and public school desegregation. Construction of Loop 281 began in 1964. The succeeding presidents during this era were Dr. E. Stanley Farrington, L.A. Andy Gwynn, John C. Murphy Jr., John T. Jack Williams, C.W. Buddy Shelburne, Charles G. Rader, Howard P. Coughlin, W. Delbert Bright, Ray W. Milam, Charles G. Tullis, John W. Harrison Jr., E.J. Ted Mooney, C. Robert Carroll, and my year was the last. On February the 1st, 1966, Ray Newnham was designated a Paul Harris Fellow by Rotary International, which was the second Paul Harris Fellow conferred in the state of Texas. 1969 brought the formation of an Interact Club at Longview High School. The first meeting was held September the 23rd, 1969. The first fundraising event was a slave auction on December the 9th, '69. 39 Interact boys were sold to the highest bidders. By 1970, the big event for Longview and Rotarians was a monumental celebration of the city's centennial, from Friday, May the 1st, through Saturday, May the 9th, 1970. Whiskers and string ties suddenly became back into style, and Rotarians of this club dominated the management of the affair. Howard Coughlin was president of the corporation formed to handle it. Delbert Bright was vice president, and Royal Carby was one of the 6 board members. I had the honor to chair the committee which published a history book. Copies still are available for sale at the Gregg County Historical Museum. Bill Rice and Dr. Charles Matthews chaired a committee which staged a historical pageant. It ran for 5 nights in Lobo Stadium. Hundreds of citizens took part in the pageant alone, including Arliss Mallory as the town drunk, and Reagan McLemore III as Rudolph Valentino. Tom Brown was nominated Secretary-Treasurer April the 24th, 1973, and was elected for the next 21 years, ending in 1994. The first annual Outstanding Vocational Student Awards at Longview High School were presented on August the 28th, 1973. South Longview Rotary Club held its first meeting on January the 3rd, 1974, with 22 charter members. The first annual Tom Putman Award, conceived by President Ted Mooney and Rotarview editor Dick Avent, was presented to Cecil Richardson on August the 10th, 1976. It is annually bestowed on the Rotarian who has contributed the most to the club during the closing year. On February the 8th, 1977, at the Rotary Inn Sweetheart Banquet, my brother and sister-in-law, LeGrand and Cassandra, and Suzanne and I had the honor to bestow upon our mother, Josephine, the Paul Harris Fellowship Award, making her the first woman honored as a Paul Harris Fellow in our club. In March 1977, John Harrison Jr. led the club into the tradition of acting as sponsors for the Lobo Rotary Relays, an annual invitational track meet hosted by Longview High School. During 1977-78, our club instituted the tradition of awarding at least one Paul Harris Fellowship annually to members who have provided exceptional support for the club's activities over a number of years. As a footnote to my family's 75th year association with this club, I had the distinct pleasure of introducing my son-in-law, Craig Abernathy, as a new member last fall, and this spring I welcomed our son Walter as the first 4th generation member of our club.
Memories like the corners of my mind, misty watercolored memories of the way we were.
Turbulent economic times hit with the oil bust in the 1980s. A new form of electing city officials takes hold with a change in the city charter, calling for the election of councilpersons from districts and the election of a ceremonial mayor. The expansion to the north begins to put strain on the city's infrastructure, yet Longview is becoming the retail hub of East Texas. With the addition of industrial parks headed by LEDCO and an emphasis on improving education with the Globe Scholar Program, the forecast for Longview's future is one of individuals pulling together with one voice to make this the greatest place on earth to worship, work, and raise a family.
Thank you very much. According to the program, everybody has 3 or 4 minutes to cover their time in Rotary history, and I told the Master of Ceremonies at a pre-meeting Thursday, I said, I don't think it can be done. And that's really true. I'm the only guy here that's got 3 minutes. During this exciting period in history of our Rotary Club from 1978 to 1995, let's begin by recognizing those individuals who were elected to lead our club, the presidents. Rogers Pope, Charles Cobb, Henry Gossett, Milton Kamak, Julian Fiegel, Dick Dial, Leo Wall, Marcus Dubose, Jack Welge, Casey Kamak, Ronnie Plowler, Dan Fiskus, Bill Rice, Jerry Adair, John Troy, and Kim Callahan. In 1978, Charles Tullis, one of our club's greatest presidents, started the year as a newly elected district governor of District 583. During these years of our history, it was marked with great success, and of course, with success comes changes. After meeting for 48 years at the old Longview Hilton hotel, later to be renamed as the Downtowner, after 48 years, we were forced to make some changes and find a new meeting place. Women were welcomed into Rotary for the first time in the history of Rotary. The Sweetheart Banquet was changed to a dinner dance, and we created new programs to advance the purpose of Rotary and what it stood for. Some of those programs were the Longview Rotary Endowment Fund. We also created the Longview Rotary Citizen of the Year Award to recognize those people who really made a difference in our community over a lifetime of service. And I'm happy to say that we're honored that over the years, 4 of our members have received that great honor: E.K. Bennett, Cecil Richardson, Hank Foster, and Vic Virgil. The Longview Rotary Golf Tournament came into being and has enabled our club to make thousands of dollars of contributions to worthwhile charitable organizations. Just to mention a couple, $20,000 for the construction of the new library, $23,000 to Rotary International for Polio Plus, which is a program to do away with polio in the world. And we celebrated 75 years anniversary for Rotary International. As we celebrate the first 75 years of the Longview Rotary Club, I'm proud to announce that Rotary International is growing and is well, and so are we. In 1995, the Longview Rotary Club became the largest Rotary Club in District 583. Our attendance over the last 17 years has been a remarkable over 95% average, due in most part to Tom Brown, who was our Secretary and Treasurer for 21 years. And lastly, during this time of our Rotary history in 1978, 95, we mourned the death of those Rotarians who died, and yet we welcome new faces into Rotary. As this great tradition of Rotary, service above self, continues, let us be mindful that it's just the beginning. Thank you.
Haven't you enjoyed this beautiful kaleidoscope of history in Longview? My goodness. I hope it has just whetted your appetite to read the book thoroughly. You ought to buy a whole bunch of extra copies for your grandchildren. Well, all good things must come to an end. Thomas, we're early. Pepe is here. Would you like for him to tell a few jokes? Thank you, Dr. Ross Judson, J.R. Curtis, these wonderful speakers. And now that handsome young president, Kim Callahan, to dismiss us.
Thank you, Dr. Norman. I'd like to thank each one of you for being here with us today. We hope the program has been interesting to you and memorable. And I'd also like to thank Thomas Welch and Dr. Norman and the other members of the planning committee that worked hard to make the meeting today happen. We're going to stand now and have Jim Hurst lead us in the four-way test. And as soon as that's complete, we'll sing Happy Birthday to Longview Rotary, and then we'll be out of here.
Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Come on in here. It's the best band in the land. There'll be bluebirds over the white cliffs of Dover tomorrow. Just you wait and see. It's 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock rock, 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock rock, 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock rock. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. And now
Hi, I'm Jan Statman, and this is the Longview Art Museum's Art Beat. We're so glad you could be here with us. And let me tell you about the goings-on at the Art Museum. No, I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to tell you to go down there and see. Because if you do that, you'll become a member, you'll have a good time, you will really enjoy yourself. The Longview Art Museum is a nonprofit organization organized for the benefit of the people in Longview. The design of the Longview Art Museum is to bring the absolute best in art to the city of Longview. And it does. This is one of the things it brings. It's our outreach program. And we are glad you're enjoying this, but if you really want to have a good time, to enjoy yourself, to learn something, come down to the Longview Art Museum, take part in some of the classes, the children's classes, the lecture series, the programs. You'll enjoy the Art Museum, so be there. I'll look forward to seeing you there. I got to tell you a story. This is strictly personal. My friend, Sandy Green, was very much like a butterfly. And like a butterfly, she was here too short and gone too soon. Sandy's mother very graciously gave me a sculpture which we both admired. It was David Romero's Angel. And after looking at that angel, I thought, this is a museum piece. This belongs to the Art Museum. So it was taken to the Art Museum. Sandy's sister, Sherry, was kind enough to carry it down to the Art Museum. And as they were taking it out of the van to put it into the museum, this beautiful butterfly, big beautiful butterfly, fluttered into the van and stood on the angel and just opened and closed its wings and didn't fly away until the angel was taken into the museum. It gave me chills. I hope you think about that story. We've got a different story here today. If I look a little bit haggard on this show, it's because I've been up all night reading a book. Not a murder mystery, not the latest in sensational scandal, but a very fascinating book about Longview, Texas. And if you get it, you're going to be up all night reading it too. It's The Club and the Town, the history of the Longview Rotary, which is in many ways the history of Longview, and it was written by Jean McWhirter. We are very fortunate to have the author with us and a Rotarian. Jean McWhirter, glad you could be here. Dr. W.D. Northcutt, who is one of the former presidents of the Rotary Club, we're so glad you could be here with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, what in the world possessed you to write this book? I'm going to hold it up. All these little orange things are my notes. Just hold them there.
It was Vic Furchel's idea.
Vic Furchel came to you.
Vic is one of the hard workers of the community for 30 or 40 years. He was the president of the Longview Rotary Club in 1962, and at that time he decided that it was time to do a history of the Rotary Club because the founders of the club, dating back from 1920, were dying out, and he wanted to recognize them and do a little history of the club at that time. That was published, edited by Floyd Huddleston, who was the editor of our weekly Rotary View bulletin at the time. And the chairman of the committee that did it was Bill Northcutt Taylor, who was a cousin of W.D.'s. The years passed, and in 1993, Vic Furchel said it's time to do another history of the club, update the old history. So he got the board of directors of the club to authorize the project, asked me to be the editor, and that's how it got the ball rolling.
It's a superb book. It's beautifully done. The photographs are wonderful. There are lots of photographs of lots of people. Any viewer out there might find a grandfather, cousin, uncle, all sorts of people, grandmother, people that they know inside the book. The photographs are great. Where did you get all those photographs?
The photographs were contributed by families of past presidents mainly. The scheme of the book was set in a meeting of past presidents that Vic Furchel called in late 1993, and they said, it's a wonderful idea. We should have a page on each year since 1920. We should have a picture of the president of the club at that time, a short biography on the president, and a summary of what happened in the city and in the club.
If I could interject a moment. The thing I have really appreciated about the book is the fact that it was designed as a 75th anniversary history of Rotary in Longview, but it is really a history of the city of Longview. You can go through this book and read about all of the leaders of our community from 1920 to 1975.
And all the scandals, they're in there.
Yes.
You didn't leave them out at all, did you?
We tried not to say anything that would embarrass anybody, but if nobody complained about what we said, we might have left some things in that were very, very interesting. Let me add that we put an index in here, about 7 pages, that includes about 2,000 entries. That's pretty exhaustive. Every name that's in the book is indexed, and a whole lot of the people that are watching here will find themselves in the book, them or their parents or uncles or grandparents, because we were either active in the Rotary Club, or more than likely they participated in some program that the Rotary Club had at the weekly
You had Boy
meetings.
Scout program. In fact, a Boy Scout is on the cover, your Troop 202.
One of the first community services that the club entered into in the 1930s was to establish the second Boy Scout troop in the city, which was Troop 2 at the time, later called Troop 202. And that picture of the construction of the dedication of their scout cabin in the city park was so impressive that we used it as the frontispiece and on the dust jacket. It shows the, roughly 60 members of the club at that time gathered in front of the scout cabin between the American flag on one side, the troop banner on the other side, and the minister in the middle. So we have God and country right there, and the Boy Scouts all wrapped up together with the Rotary Club. The minister was Father Jim Callahan of the Catholic Church.
And many of these scouts grew up to join the Rotary Club as adults. And so I think that makes it an interesting progression. Now, W.D., you're part of that interesting progression. I read in here that your grandfather was a charter member of the Rotary Club.
That's true.
So Dr. Northcutt was a charter member of the club, and then your father was very active, and then you were and Dr. Northcutt was a former president.
Well, the biggest joy I've had is introducing my son as the fourth generation member of the Longview Rotary Club.
Right. That must be, well, both of you grew up in Longview.
Yes.
So that must be a really magnificent experience to be able to walk the streets that your grandparents walked, to see where they lived, to participate and continue the good works that they started. Your family grew up here also, or you grew up here and your family was very active in the community.
I was born and raised here, as my father was, and his mother and her mother before her, back in 1847.
Well, we have some treasures here sitting on the stage with us, people who are original to Longview, the descendants of the people who started Longview. It must have been a very different place back even 75 years ago when the Rotary Club started.
I was amazed to see some of the things that came out of reading about the people that were involved in the Rotary Club and doing the biographies of the presidents. You learn things that, for example, one of our presidents, Kinch-Kinchelo, served in the Russian Revolution at the age of 16 in the American Expeditionary Force to Russia after World War I. Most of the presidents of the club were volunteers in the military service from World War I through the Cold War, and it emphasized to me the overriding involvement of the people of this country during this century with war, with the military, and with the fact that we had citizen soldiers, mainly.
And people who are willing to leave their homes to go defend their country, which is, I think sometimes we tend to forget the sacrifices that so many people made and so many Rotarians in Longview made. I think this is an interesting history of Longview. You didn't start out writing a history of Longview, but it turned out that way. Because
that
it
was
go ahead.
Howard Coughlin's idea mainly. At the first meeting of the former past presidents defining the scope of the book in late 1993, Howard said, let's make it a history of the town as well. Let's put in each year something that happened in the city to set the stage and make it interesting and worthwhile, not only for Rotarians, but equally and even more so for the citizens of the town who are not Rotarians.
Or whose family, like me, someone whose family did not grow up here and did not start out here, but it's fascinating to read about it. And it's a history of Longview as seen through the eyes of the movers and shakers, the people who did stuff, the people who founded things, even whether they did it through Rotary or through their businesses or through their charitable and social activities. These were the people who made things work.
The book may be of some use to newcomers to the city to find out what the city was like in 1920 or since 1920, and sort of what's the basis of the character and the spirit of the town, which we tried to capture.
Which is outgoing, which is forward-looking, which is businesslike and also aesthetic. All these things were brought out in this book when you read what the presidents of your club had to say.
One thing that was surprising to me was, in reading and finding out and writing about the presidents of the club and the other leaders of the club through the years, civic leaders in general, was that they were not mainly born to old families in the town.
Mm-hmm.
They were mainly had come to the city as young adults, looking to seek their fortunes, or else they were children of the young adults coming in on the make, so to speak. And they found the place to be accepting and worthwhile for newcomers to come in and do well, and they stayed and put down roots and became responsible citizens and leaders.
I think a lot of the reason for that is that Longview is a relatively new town. It was not established until 1870, and all of the towns that were established earlier in the vicinity have seemed to have cliquish groups that control the city. Longview's always been very open, very friendly, very welcoming to new people who come. I can't think of any community that I've ever seen or read about or have ever visited that has made up now of approximately 75,000 people, that has a community theater, an opera repertory company, a symphony, 2 museums, both art museum, historical museum, and it could go on and on and on.
A ballet theater.
The ballet theater. And what else? I mean, help me, because it is, well, we have 2 private schools of significance, and many more, I'm sure, but Trinity School goes all the way through high school level, upper school level, and Chrisman Preparatory School is a school for children with learning disabilities, and this has been drawing students from all over East Texas that have the need for this.
We have remarkable public schools, 3 public
well,
schools
yes.
with it, 4 public schools.
4 public
within the
school
city
systems
limits.
within the city
A
limits.
fantastic library. How many cities this and a theater? We can't forget our theater. How many cities this size have all those? And you know why I think they have all those things? Because of what you said. Someone with talent comes into the community, they're welcomed with open arms.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have talent and you come to Longview and you want to be president of the Rotary, just get in and work, and you may get
It'll
there.
happen.
It'll
You're right.
happen. You want to be director of the museum, you just show how smart you are. You want to be an actor in the theater, come on, give it a shot.
Play in the symphony.
Play in this, well, I don't know, you have to have a lot of
Lot of
talent to do
talent.
that, and a lot of ability.
But there are so many talented people in our community. Look at the theater and the opera. We have grand opera that local people actually perform.
How many cities our size, certainly in East Texas, can say that? How many cities larger can say they've got a opera repertory theater? Not that
Very
many.
few until you get into the real metropolitan areas.
And don't you think perhaps the attitude of people like you and people like the people who are mentioned in this fantastic book is what makes that, don't you think that attitude makes that possible?
Very definitely.
I think, well, what if one of our viewers is watching and maybe didn't start out here, maybe their grandparents didn't start here, maybe they just came. What are they going to find interesting in here?
They'll find, among other things, when the milestone events of the city happened and how they happened. For example, when right after World War II, when R.G. Letourneau came and began to make this an industrial city for the first time, the biggest industry we'd had before then was Kelly Plow Works. The next biggest was the Gray Manufacturing's box factory, which made containers for shipping vegetables and fruits. This is an agricultural town.
And the railroad.
Right.
Can't forget the railroad.
Right. And
banking.
Course, right. The oil boom, of course, it happened in 1930. But until we didn't have any other industry other than the oil and the refineries until Letourneau came after World War II. That was because, number one, Carl Estes had the vision and leadership to twist arms to get a Army hospital established here.
And
So
many people out
Hospital.
there remember Harmon General Hospital.
Right, and that was no mean trick to get that done.
That was the beginning of LeadCo for Longview. It was
Really?
the infancy of.
And then after the war came the trick of getting it converted to a suitable civilian use that would benefit the city. Finding an industry that could take over the Harmon General Hospital and build a factory near it to develop the city. Carl Estes was a very active in real estate development for industry at that time, also published in the newspapers. And, you know, part of the story of how that happened was contained in Rotary Club programs. First, when Carl Estes came, the Rotary Club had a party for him and had him to come speak to us. That's in here. From the Rotary View bulletins that we have on hand from the 1940s and a few back to the 30s. When we got R.G. Letourneau's plan in here, we had programs about that. Clippings from newspapers that were in the scrapbooks that the people gave us to look at to do the research for this. Write-ups in the Rotary View about the principals involved, R.G. and Carl. Other milestones when Texas Eastman came, when the Stroh, which was called the Schlitz Brewery, was established. Milestones like when we had the first shopping mall in Longview. It was not the one out here that we now think of as Longview Mall. It was going to be at the northwest corner, the southwest corner of Eastman Road and Highway 80. And it got halfway through. In other words, they got the site acquired and cleared, and it didn't happen for various reasons, but the story of that is in here, etc.
Well, what you
Milestones of the
did
city.
was the chapters in the book called The Club and the Town, when people want to know what it's called, the chapters correspond to the events in the city and how they happened. Now, I've written a few books, and so I'm always curious about how you went about it. This is a major project. Took hundreds and hundreds of hours, I'm sure. How did you get started? How did, for instance, I know there's a really nice interview with W.D. Northcutt in here that told everybody, you want to hear about this man? Just read in this book. Everything, his life is an open book. How did you go about getting all that information? How did you amass all this information?
First, I'm just the point man in a team project. I get all the credit when a whole lot of the work was done by the past presidents of the club, like W.D., and also by a committee of workers, including W.D. I mean, everything that happens in the club, you call on W.D. to help you, and he just quietly, sees that things get done right.
Everything happens in the city the same way.
And Dick
Oh, it's very kind and very wrong.
But anyway, the effort was managed by John Troy, who was the president of the club at that time, 93, 94. Vic Furchel was the father of the project. He's the one that, you know, had the idea and had us off in the right direction and recruited everybody. And John Troy managed it, got the committees together so that we got everything going and finished at the right time. So I had probably 20 people feed me stuff. They would contact past presidents' relatives to get old pictures and write-ups about their parents.
And there's a whole section of pictures of lots of people. And there's pictures of the individuals.
So I had a lot of help. They fed it to me, and I edited and rewrote. But I was more than the editor, I was the author, but it was based on information that was fed to me by this.
I would hate to see your
hard-working committee.
desk while you're collecting all this information. It must have been stacked higher up to the ceiling.
I kept it in a one of these little portable file cabinet crates, like the kind you put in the attic, you know, that you can take out of and put away when somebody comes into the office and you want to look neat.
He's very organized too. You must realize that, because no one
you'd have to be to amass this incredible amount of material in an orderly, very orderly fashion. If you want to know it, well, like you were speaking about Troy, who was the president when this was all, you can look in here and in this terrific index and find Mr. Troy, and then you can turn to find his page and see his picture and his wife's name and everything about him. Were provided, you know, and I think his family, what he's done, what he does for a living, just about everything you want to know about this past president and what has happened during his presidency. Which, being president of a club like this, a major service club, is, I would think, a very responsible job and not always such an easy one.
Especially, it meets every week. You know, it's not a monthly meeting or quarterly meeting, it's a weekly meeting. And that keeps you pretty close to home.
Keeps you on your toes, and you do more than preside. This is an international organization. I would think this book would be of interest to the international group to find out what happens in a city like Longview, which is, I think, probably more typical of Middle America, or of America, than many other places. So it might be of interest to people all over the country to find out, not only to people right here in Longview.
Wonderful idea. I wonder if we can sell them by the thousands all over the country to other Rotary clubs.
That would help our foundation, wouldn't it?
Yes, let me add that this book started off just to be for the benefit of the Rotary Club members, but after we got into it and made it a history of the town, we realized that it would be a money-making project also. That's when we began to make it look pretty. And,
it's a gorgeous book. Who printed it for you?
Hudson Printing.
Hudson Printing does beautiful work.
Wonderful, and they were very supportive. But I was going to say that the income from the book, the profits, go to the Longview Rotary Endowment Fund, which is the nonprofit endowment that's operated by our club, and we give money out of that, out of the income from that corpus every year, to various worthy projects around Longview. So when you buy a book,
such
you're supporting
as,
good.
Maybe people would like to know what kind of projects are supported through this. I know you do some scholarships.
Well, the endowment board has not lately given scholarships. The club itself, out of club fund, gives scholarships. The endowment fund has been supporting other things I can't remember because I'm not on the endowment board. But,
and I imagine people on the endowment board don't know exactly what's in the book until they read it. So one person can't do everything.
And by the way, we can read in here if you had time and look it up and see.
There's an index right there. You can find out with the endowment board who's on the endowment board and what they do.
That's right.
The book is available here in Longview. I think it's available. I know it's available at the Longview Historical Museum and possibly Barron's Books. Is it? And it would be of interest to just about anybody who lives in the city, because it's a history of the city as seen through the movers and shakers, the people who formed the city, the people who are continuing to form the city. So if it wouldn't be, it's beyond just Rotary members and their families.
Very definitely, certainly.
I found it interesting, and I think everybody else. This is your second book about Longview.
And let me add that this, in many ways, is a sequel to the book that the Gregg County Historical museum published several years earlier that I wrote for the Junior League of Longview earlier than that, called Traditions of the Land, The History of Gregg County. This was the history of the whole county from the 1830s to 1960. And in it, we tried not to mention too many individuals' names and talk about their careers, because there was no end to the possible names that we might want to discuss, and then we didn't want to get into any possible quarrels about who to mention and who not to mention. So we just tried not to mention anybody except as they related to specific historical events. This book, the new book, The Club and the Town, picks up in 1920 and goes past the end of this book in 1960 to 1995. And in it, we not only mention names, but the book is centered on names and people. So all the names that we couldn't put in the Gregg County book are named and listed and described, I hope, to your satisfaction in The Club and the Town.
You could say this book names names and tells the tales,
Right.
except that they're all good names, and most of them are good tales of growth and development and how the city has progressed. It's an amazing piece of work. You have certainly done yourself proud and done your club proud. It's something that should certainly be of interest to anybody who lives here or who's interested in the culture of a community of this size.
Would be good for not only if you're interested in the history yourself, but as a gift for anybody else, anybody outside of town that might be interested in knowing what your place is like. Buy a book and send it to them.
Or your cousins, and your
Absolutely.
nieces and your
kids,
nephews.
you'll need to
Find
buy
out what
one
your
for all
grandfather.
your kids and your grandkids, and save them, because this will be a
This is going to be a
item.
collector's item.
Friends and relatives who grew up here and have moved away. They would appreciate it.
I think they would treasure it. And this is going to be a collector's item because it's limited edition, is it not?
Yes, and it's printed on acid-free paper so that it will not decompose through the years like
beautiful
old
book,
paper would.
handsome.
Right, it's a very durable dust jacket, and the binding itself is a very high-quality cloth with gold leaf embossed in it and photographs all over the place, including in the end papers. Here's the present Rotary Club and the present meeting place right there on the ends.
It's just an exquisite project, a beautiful book, beautifully done, and unlike so many history books, which we tend to think of as being a little bit dry, this is not the least bit dull. You don't have to memorize anything. You can just learn it all. Thank you so much for being here with us and telling us some more about the club and the town, the Rotary Club and the city of Longview, Texas, year to year. Jean McWhirter and Dr. W.D. Northcutt have been visiting with us. Thank you. So nice of you to be here. I'm Jan Statman. This is the Longview Art Museum's Art Beat. Thank you for being here. Come back and see us again next time.